Okay, Esther.
Hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to the third event of the Youth Action Week. It's an honor to have all of you amongst ourselves. We look forward to a very interesting conversation where we know that today's event is themed rather on reclaiming our education future. My name is Esther, Simon is the surname, and I serve on the GCE board. Without wasting any further time, allow me to hand over the floor to Grant to give us the welcoming remarks. Grant, you may now take the stage.
Okay, thank you so much, Esther, and thanks to all that have joined, and mostly to the organizers of this event. I know that this is the last event of the 4 events that we scheduled to ensure that we really bring it forward on the issues that are affecting youth and students. It is really an honor for us within the Secretariat, to be part of this event, and we are looking forward to further engagement, further ideas, further processes that will come out of this event. Just to highlight that, I think for us within GCE, we are not necessarily just doing the youth engagement as a fashionable issue. We mean business. We are really serious on this. We really want to ensure that youth have occupy the same space within the education sector that others do occupy. We will put all the resources available all the time that is necessary to ensure that youth have got all that necessary spaces. And now with all of that, it is now up to the young people themselves to really raise their hand, to really show up, to be part of the process. One thing that I would like to say is this, that at times you can wait for invitation. At times invitations are not necessary. You have to storm the process. And I think this is the time for the youth to do that. We will try all that we know how to ensure that the advocacy spaces that GCE occupies at a national, regional, even global level, that youth are integrated within those processes, and make it a point, make it a plan to be part of that process. In 2015, GCE took a decision to engage youth, to be part of the process. The GCE board has already shown that, because we do have equal share of board positions within GCE in all constituencies. The youth have got 2 seats as well. It's time for the youth to rise and to take up the issues. Education, the issue around education cannot be discussed outside the youth. The youth and students are the core beneficiaries of it, meaning that you have to champion the cause. No more sitting on the sidelines, no more being just mere spectators. It's time to engage in the process. Remember, in other spaces, you might be invited. In others, you might not. But storm the process. Be the champions of the process. I'm looking forward to the conversation and to the discussion, and I hope that we are going to map up a very good strategy that will help us to move forward as we establish a GCE youth and student movement that will be exemplary to all the other structures that exist. We want a representative structure. We want youth that are accountable to their own fellow youth and students. So looking forward to the discussions, and thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to share the opening remark. Thank you so much, Esther.
Thank you. Indeed, it's time for the youth to rise and to take our issues to the forefront. Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Grant. I will now give the floor to Martina, who we serve on the same board, and as well is going to be my co-host on this discussion, to just give us the context setting and give us a little bit of in-depth in terms of the strategy on youth in the GCE. Welcome and take the stage, Martina.
Thank you so much, Esther, for the floor. And thank you to all team members behind the Global Campaign for Education that have been working tirelessly to put on this 3 series of events around the Youth Action Month. It's an honor to be giving this speech and to be able to value as well the work that has been going on behind the scenes to have this done. It's important to discuss the thematic topic we're here for today, that is youth and student engagement, because unfortunately we are facing a number of threats, external and internal, to the engagement of young people and students in their education, not only in their classrooms learning, but more than that, at the decision-making table of the governing structures, deciding what are we learning, how are we learning it, and what is the purpose of what are we learning. That has all been put a bit under the spotlight thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's important here to recognize what are the threats that we are facing, to be able to speak up, to organize between us, to form representative structures, to be democratic in those representative structures, to have the resources for training, to call, to demand better resources from our governments, and finally to have a seat at those tables. So I'm really, really honored to be here and part of the facilitation of this session together with Esther, my co-person in the board of the Global Campaign for Education, representing the youth and student constituency. This was a massive improvement from GCE's perspective to introduce 2 seats in their executive structures for youth and student representatives. And we're not stopping here. This is just the beginning of it. Today we're going to be discussing a little bit the strategy, the youth and student engagement strategy. It's basically a policy document outlining what is the context we are working in, what are our goals and objectives, what were the previous goals and objectives, what have we achieved, and what we can achieve in the future. And I'm really excited that while this is the last event of the Youth Action Month series, we will be looking towards organizing another event before the end of this year. That is the Global Youth and Student Caucus meeting, where we'd like to adopt this youth engagement strategy, which would include as well points of work and manifests, so to say, for the next years for the youth and student constituency of GCE. So thank you very much for allowing me this welcome speech.
Thank you very much, Martina. Allow us then to move into our panel discussion. I think everyone is really looking forward to the inputs and discussions that are going to be brought by our speakers. But before we get into the discussion itself, I'll give each speaker just a few seconds to rather introduce themselves, your name, the organization that you're representing, the country where you're coming from, just so that everyone that's in this discussion can get to know who will be talking or who will be engaging in the panel discussion. So we may start with Rawan. You may take the floor to just generally introduce yourself. Rawan?
Yes. Hi,
Kindly
everyone. This is me, Rawan Ayash, from Palestine, and I'm representing the Arab Campaign for Education for All.
Thank you very much. Paula,
Thank you.
You may take the floor.
Muy buenos días, yo soy Paulo Santos de Perú, estoy que represento al Movimiento de Estudiantes Latinoamericanos y del Caribe. Gracias.
Thank you. Francisco, kindly introduce yourself. Francisco? Okay, while we wait for Francisco to turn on his mic, may we move on to Carmen, please?
Hello, everyone. I'm Carmen, originally from Spain, and I'm here on behalf of the Global Student Forum. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Carmen. Naomi, we hand over to you.
Hello, hi, my name is Naomi Nyamwea. I am a research officer at the Malala Fund. I'm originally from Nairobi, Kenya, which is where I grew up, and I only moved to London in 2018. And I think about Nairobi every day. I'm really happy to be here with you all.
All right, thank you so much, Naomi. I see Francisco is here. Can you kindly introduce yourself? Francisco, we can't hear you.
A ver, hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Me escuchan mejor ahí? Sí, perfecto. Les comentaba, soy Francisco Carranza Ríos, originario de México, y hemos compartido espacio desde la MELAC, desde el Movimiento Estudiantil Latinoamericano y del Caribe, y es un gusto estar con ustedes, compañeras.
Thank you so much. All the speakers have introduced themselves. Now we'll move into our discussion. We know that this event is themed Reclaiming Our Education Future. We would like to start with Rawan by just throwing your question rather so that we can get to tap into the discussion and get your input. And the first question would be, what tangible ways can outcomes of our dialogues be incorporated into the GCE Youth Engagement Strategy? Rawan, you may take the floor and let us step into your knowledge, please.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you. في البداية اسمحوا لي أعبر عن سعادتي وفخري إني أنا هلأ عم بشوف هاي الاستراتيجية لإخراط الشباب عم بتشوف النور بعد كل الشغل اللي صار على مدار ال3 سنوات السابقة. فأنا كنت من ضمن المشاركين في اللقاء الشباب الأول ضمن الحملة العالمية للتعليم اللي صار في نيبال في 2018، ولما في اللي هو الجمعية العامة في 2018 تم إقرار مقعدين للشباب في مجلس إدارة الحملة العالمية للتعليم، وهناك كمان حطينا الخطوط العريضة الأولى لهاي الاستراتيجية وإيش هي السبل الممكنة لإشراك وضمان المشاركة الفاعلة للشباب في هيكلية الحملة العالمية للتعليم. وكمان أنا كنت جزء في اللي هو اللقاء الاستراتيجي اللي صار في جوهانسبرغ 2019 اللي هناك كمان إحنا حطينا الدرافت الأولى لهاي الاستراتيجية. I will switch now to English. So you are asking about the tangible ways, and yes, it's a good start after the past weeks. Crucial issues were discussed on the economics of education and the impacts of colonization on education. So actually it took me some time to think in these ways, and I can sum up some few mechanisms that should be embedded in the GCE Youth Engagement Strategy to ensure a real involvement and participation of youth, and to ensure that the strategy is based on human rights and participatory approach. I can doubt that the outcomes of the previous dialogues and workshops can't be achieved without taking into consideration some determinants like the context gap between the regions, between South and North, and the level of knowledge for youth in the developing and the developed countries, and the financial status for these countries, and as well the political will that might limit the participation of youth in some countries. So GCE and the international NGOs as well considered with education, all international NGOs that considered with education should consider the process of setting and designing the educational policies as a collaborative and participatory and educational space for all actors and stakeholders from bottom to up to truly and actively participate in designing these policies. And surely the youth has to have their space and participate in setting these policies that will later on affect their future. As well, we can see that there is unwillingness among youth to participate at the sectors and levels, especially sometimes in education. Why? Because they feel that they are excluded from the planning and implementing processes, and they feel themselves as only a targeted groups, not a planner or even an implementer for these programs and projects that were implemented from the NGOs. So it's necessary to involve youth at all stages, from designing to planning to implementing and monitoring, so they can feel that this is for their own and for their interest. As well, GCE has to work on creating role models for youth, which they could follow. I can see that some regions now are working on creating these role models and creating youth groups and building the capacities for youth And now ACIA is working on setting the cornerstone for the youth group, and it's now working on building the capacities of these youth. And I can see some of the participants in this youth group is now participating with us in this event. So GCE can work on reinforcing these groups and build their capacities to actively participate in all structures and levels. As well as we have to work on enhancing the mutual learning mechanisms as a new approach for building the capacities of youth, taking into consideration the gaps of knowledge amongst youth and amongst the regions as well. This could be through creating spaces and initiatives and opportunities for mutual learning that can affect and change youth attitudes and their academic and educational path. Doing so can lead to a positive change for the individual, the community, and as well for the surrounding environment. By that, we are promoting the global citizenship amongst youth and raise the individuals who feel connected to the community he or she lives in. I trust that this is really connected to the GCE strategic goal on the transformative education.
Wow.
As well as we can work on creating shadow bodies from youth, which works on promoting the accountability within the NECs, the National Education Coalitions. We are now talking about the bottom at the national level, and they can promote the accountability within the NECs at the all levels, from planning to implementing, going through the monitoring levels as well. We can also involving youth and youth-led researches and build their capacities in research fields to research on topics and issues that really matter them. We can also work on creating an independent space as a platform for discussion for all youth at the national, regional, and international level to exchange the knowledge and taking the feedback from them at the all levels, and to consider these feedback while setting and designing the policies. As well as we can embed embed the youth in the adults' platforms to exchange the knowledge as well between youth and adults. The strategy as well should reinforce the policy dialogues at the national levels to open up the discussions on financing the education, which is really a very important topic these days, and the taxation, the justice, and combating the colonization in education and privatization. GCE finally as well could design advocacy campaigns that advocates for youth issues and combating the inequalities of education, which should be at the top priorities of youth-led campaigns. And let's not forget that youth are the power and the engine for real change that we are all looking and desiring for.
Okay, thank you so much, Rawan, for that rather impactful contribution. I'd just like to remind our participants that the chat room is open if you'd like to make your contribution, if you'd like to ask any question to our panelists, and then we'll get to engage you afterwards. I would like to move straight to Paula Sessa.
Thank you, Esther.
And I would like you to please add on what recommendations we have for GCE as a movement when it comes to centering youth perspectives and leadership.
Sí, buen día. bueno, voy a centrar mi respuesta en dos aspectos. El primero de ellos es el trabajo y la recomendación que doy para la CME a nivel de las coaliciones nacionales en cada país. En primer lugar, creo yo que es importante que los jóvenes o que la CME promueva el liderazgo de los jóvenes en los procesos nacionales, en las problemáticas que tienen los jóvenes a nivel de sus propias coyunturas nacionales, ¿no? Esto es, pues, muchos jóvenes que estamos en la campaña mundial, en nuestras campañas de nuestras regiones, compartimos luchas a nivel de nuestro país, y es importante que la campaña mundial, que la CME, también pueda vincularse y también pueda apoyar estas problemáticas y luchas que tenemos los jóvenes que somos partes de la CME. Creo yo que no ha habido un espacio de visibilización de estas problemáticas ante la CME. Es importante reforzar eso, dado que los jóvenes, pues, también, más allá de compartir nuestras experiencias, vivimos coyunturas difíciles en nuestros países a nivel de la educación, ¿no? Por otro lado, yo quisiera también agregar que es importante que la CME pueda coordinar a nivel de liderazgo joven, pueda coordinar mayores encuentros y pues también una estructura que pueda ser visible lo que los jóvenes vienen haciendo en las diversas partes del mundo, ¿no? Del continente. En primer lugar, lo que se viene trabajando a nivel de Latinoamérica o también otros continentes, sería importante que podamos compartir este conocimiento, estas experiencias, dado pues que las realidades con respecto a la educación no deberían ser o los retos, ¿no?, actuales con respecto a la educación no deberían ser tan diferentes en las diferentes realidades que tenemos a nivel global. Bueno, yo también quisiera agregar que es importante dentro de una otra recomendación que quisiera agregar para la CME, para centrar las perspectivas y el liderazgo de los jóvenes, creo yo que es pues tener la posibilidad de formar a los jóvenes que estamos dentro de la campaña y además fuera de ella, obviamente, en liderazgo joven y además también en advocacy, que es formación política y liderazgo, para que también pues, puedan sacar adelante las propuestas que llevan, ¿no? Como digo, muchos jóvenes vinculados a la campaña mundial estamos actualmente liderando procesos y coyunturas de lucha en nuestros países, pero es importante también que todos como estructura a nivel de nuestro país, de nuestra región y a nivel de la campaña mundial también puedan pues, compartir estos procesos de lucha que vamos teniendo en nuestros países, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, finalmente yo quisiera concluir pues que en ambos niveles, a nivel de los países y a nivel también de lo que podemos hacer como estructura joven a nivel de campaña mundial, es importante pues siempre visibilizar lo que hemos venido trabajando. Creo que hasta el día de hoy en el Perú, por ejemplo, voy a dar el caso del Perú, hemos tenido muchos procesos y coyunturas con respecto a la educación y pues no hemos tenido de repente en su momento la formación debida y bueno, los espacios debidos para poder compartir estas experiencias. Creo yo que de aquí para adelante, para los demás jóvenes que compartan luchas y que tengan problemáticas ligadas a la educación, sería interesante pues tener espacios de formación que los puedan preparar para estos momentos, tener una estructura donde puedan compartir sus demandas y compartir con las demás campañas a nivel mundial lo que viene pasando en sus países. Y bueno, también es importante que la CME pues pueda tener un discurso y pueda llegar a diferentes partes. Por ejemplo, si bien es cierto, es un reto para los jóvenes en los países, pero es importante también que la CME pueda agregar dentro de su discurso, por ejemplo, más luchas, ¿no? Más temas ligadas al derecho a la educación. En espacios, por ejemplo, rurales, en espacios de comunidades nativas, que también me ha tocado compartir bastante con ellos, comunidades nativas y comunidades indígenas, pues los retos son muy diferentes a los retos que tenemos en las ciudades o en las capitales. Entonces, es importante que la CME también pueda incluir dentro de sus retos, pues los retos que tienen los jóvenes y niños y niñas en las comunidades indígenas, comunidades nativas, dado que muchas veces son los espacios donde se vulnera más el derecho a la educación. Y bueno, muchas veces los jóvenes que tenemos un liderazgo en las capitales, no sabemos de repente cómo poder llegar a estos espacios de comunidades nativas y pues también plantear soluciones. Entonces, bueno, pues como conclusión sería eso, ¿no? Tener espacios de formación para que los jóvenes enfrenten las problemáticas y coyunturas en sus países, tener una estructura, un espacio de visibilización de las problemáticas y las luchas que estamos teniendo los jóvenes en nuestros países, para poder compartirlas a nivel mundial. Y bueno, como tercer punto también, ver cómo la CME puede vincularse al trabajo y a los retos que tenemos los jóvenes en nuestras comunidades indígenas nativas, que en su mayoría pues son retos vinculados al no acceso, ¿no?, de las niñas a una educación. Muchas veces por patrones pues de machismo en las comunidades es que las niñas no pueden acceder a una educación en las comunidades nativas. Entonces, creo que los retos son diferentes, pero es importante hacerlos visibles, uno, y en segundo lugar también compartir espacios para poder plantearnos soluciones. Muchas gracias.
All right, thank you so much. Indeed, a lot from. All right, Francisco, over to you. Thinking ahead of the Global Youth and Student Caucus in December 2021, what thematic areas of focus should be considered in our planning? I see Francisco might be having technical difficulties. While we wait for him to log back on, we'll then move on to Carmen, and then I would like you to reflect on what focus areas should be included in a potential GCE youth and student-led campaign. Carmen, you may take the floor.
Thank you for having me here today. This Youth Action Month has been a great opportunity for young activists and the constituencies they represent to speak up about different issues that concern us. We started with the economics of education, then how to decolonize education, and finally today having the chance to discuss the future GCE youth strategy and youth action in general. I believe no matter how inclusive or accessible an organization can be, there is always room to improve. In this regard, I think that many times youth and students are relegated to a second place. For example, me as a feminist, I don't want just women to talk about feminism and work on feminism. I want society at large to understand why this cause is important and why everyone should be supporting it. As a student representative and also as a young person, I don't want just students to talk about student issues. That's why one of my recommendations would be for GCE to push its member organizations to create seats for youth and students in their executive structures, because that way youth and students won't be in a second place, but able to speak in those forums where it is fundamental to have a voice. When talking about a campaign, I think through this Youth Action Month, we've been able to listen to many topics and ideas that are worth a campaign. But the most important thing when organizing a youth and a student campaign is to have these two groups truly leading the process and shaping it on its own. Moreover, as Rawan said before, it is important to build bridges between the South and the North. GCE has the opportunity to bring together people from all over the world, and I believe we can learn a lot from each other. As some speakers have mentioned already, students and young people are also part of societies, and we belong to different groups and witness different kinds of oppressions. We are women, members of the LGBT+ community, racialized people, people with disabilities, and alone, etc. Therefore, taking an intersectional approach when designing a campaign is fundamental. GCE has the advantage of being composed of youth and student constituencies led by activists with a very long and historic background in managing organizations, as well as lobbying with the stakeholders on educational policy. By further trusting and supporting their ideas, GCE can move closer to ensuring not only simply engagement of young people in events, but meaningful impact. As Ovesu, one of our member organizations, says, nothing about us without us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Indeed, nothing about us without us. Over to you, Naomi. What focus areas should be included in a potential GCE youth and student-led campaign?
Thank you. And thank you to all the other speakers who have spoken before me. So I think that there are 4 areas that should be included, of course, among other areas, especially in the context of education in emergencies. So first, I believe that we should include the promotion of a gender-responsive and inclusive planning of emergency responses in education. So in order to ensure that there is school participation and that school participation is improved for girls in emergencies, then the intervention should be sustainable, they should be flexible, and they should be able to create circumstances that enable for the formation of new behaviors and norms, and that change the ways in which society relates to girls. So they should also have that gender transformative aspect. And I believe that if girls and communities are involved at the planning stage, then their concerns and their narratives and their views on how their lives are would be used to inform emergency responses and planning. And then in the case of an emergency, then these views would help to address the barriers that would be preventing girls from continuing school during emergencies. So girls' participation in the planning stage is very essential to ensure that the responses are effective in addressing their needs in ways that benefit them. So it's important for girls' voices to be heard systematically and for the planning process to very intentionally include the inclusion of the voices of girls. I think the second thing that could go into the strategy is pushing for the need to strengthen gender responsive distance education. And distance education is not new, but I think when COVID-19 struck, then it became so apparent how important distance education is. But the thing about distance education is that it can kind of like multiply vulnerabilities. So by way of example, there's research that Malala Fund carried out. So we had a rapid response survey in Nigeria, Ethiopia, Pakistan, and India. And in all the countries that we carried out this research, we found that girls have negotiated access to using phones. So you might have distance learning during an emergency that's taking place, that's happening via mobile phone, but you have boys being able to access it more than girls, given the norms that already exist. And so then as we're thinking about provision of distance education in order to improve learning outcomes, then we need to be careful that the tools that we use do not end up worsening education inequalities. And even away from like the gender inequalities, there's also the income inequalities. So you have gaps in access to technologies given different incomes in different households, and you end up just worsening the inequalities that already exist. So these distance learning education provisions need to be responsive to all these different needs that different people have, and they should also be able to address the gender norms that prevent girls from accessing education. Some suggestions for distance education provision could be no-tech or low-tech practices. So no-tech practices would be like print and paper-based distance learning, and low-tech practices could be like radio-based learning, where regardless of your gender, you're able to access the tools that you need to be able to continue to learn. The third issue that I would like to put forward to you would be to leverage on social protection that already exists. And these are the social protection strategies that are helping to reduce the financial barriers that are stopping girls from access to school, because financial barriers during an emergency, they multiply. And even when probably the emergency situation has subsided, families have already taken a financial hit. And so if they have to make the decision about which of their children they're going to send to school, then they might privilege their male children over their female children. So there's a very important role that social protection plays. And so these social protection networks should be improved such that in the case of an emergency, they're able to extend to the increasing number of vulnerable children and adolescents within those crisis contexts. These social protection interventions should be context relevant, and these are things that include like cash transfers and social stipends, and they can play like a really essential role in supporting households to overcome, as I've said, the financial barriers to girls' continuity of learning during school closures and their re-enrollment when school opens. And cash transfers and other approaches can provide linkages to like the non-financial protection aspects, such as like psychosocial support and providing like spaces for girls to be safe. So those are also important in an emergency setting, but the planning has to happen before the emergency happens. Another example of like a social protection strategy would be school feeding, for example. So in the case of an emergency, then there should be a way to provide this school feeding to children that are not necessarily going to school through food baskets or food banks or community provided meals, which can help households overcome the household food insecurity, which would definitely divert the attention of any child from learning, and girls more especially, and probably push them into child labor activities. And the last issue that I would bring to all of your attention would be the need to understand how much program costs and the best way to get value for money. So there are many great programs out there, and there are many great impact evaluations that have been done, but these impact evaluations tend to lack the costing aspect. And if we don't know how much programs cost, and we can't compare the cost against the impact, then we can't be sure that what we're pushing for is really the best thing for education in emergencies. And we have scarce resources, and so we have to make sure that we're getting the most value for our money. Because if you have limited funds, then relative affordability is very important. So we should really push for having information on the costs of successful programs, because this way we can ensure that people are getting the most support that they can get as effectively as possible. And I think that this is something that's not a controversial ask at all, to ask for costing, but it's something that's rarely done. And I think that there should be a greater effort put into documenting the information that already exists, but even going forward to making sure that we systematically capture the cost of programs, so that we're able to really measure the value that we can get from the programs that we're using for girls' education in emergencies. Yeah, so I think that's my answer to that question. Thank you.
All right, now thank you so much, Naomi, for that impactful contribution. Francisco, I see you're back. I would like you to kindly answer the question around thinking ahead of the Global Youth and Student Caucus in December 2021. What thematic areas of focus should be considered in our planning? Was that Francisco's question?
Sí, muchas gracias por la palabra. Hace rato tenía problemas de conectividad, pero pues vamos a iniciar este pequeño diálogo, y la verdad tengo muchas formas de querer iniciarlo, pero Creo que comenzaremos mencionando a las clases sociales porque son quienes definen el mundo actual a través de la conformación de los sistemas sociales consecuentes de la privatización y de que prácticamente todo tiene un corte económico antes del sentido humano. ¿A qué voy? A que las condiciones actuales para el mundo son todo un reto, especialmente aquellas que atravesamos los jóvenes, debido que para la gran mayoría de nosotros nos resulta denigrante y conflictivo los entornos sociales, políticos, económicos y epistémicos incluso del mundo, porque los derechos humanos quedan en segundo plano, porque las prácticas no originan una democracia que permita dar cabida a una sociedad politizada, creativa, empática, comprometida y capaz de ejercer sus derechos. El actual modelo económico mundial y desde su perspectiva epistemológica, las políticas que se han aplicado para garantizar los derechos humanos han formado al ciudadano actual, un ciudadano que vive en la cultura de la explotación. Lo que sucede es que la educación es afectada en la forma de materialización del paradigma económico en el terreno social. Lo que para la lógica del mercado se traduce en promover el desarrollo de prácticas y contenidos homogeneizadores en todos los contextos. El mundo requiere de una transformación en la manera en que atiende las necesidades del sector público, priorizando la planificación de la inversión del sector salud como el de educación, como parte de los principales derechos humanos. Por ello, la insuficiencia educativa que se vivió en los meses pasados, cuando millones de estudiantes en nuestras regiones no pudieron cumplir con el ciclo escolar y el currículum formal, porque la educación en línea fue insuficiente. Esta cultura y costumbres tan irrazonables a la que hemos llegado y la poca conciencia que tenemos, por eso es tan importante mencionar que los diálogos forman una parte y una oportunidad muy importante para encontrar los temas para nuestra agenda. ¿Por qué lo digo? Por la falta que hemos tenido para encontrar empleo, la limitación de la posibilidad para seguir estudiando, las carencias para lograr un hogar digno, la discriminación a la diversidad cultural, el acceso a la salud para pocos, entre otros. De forma sentipensante deberíamos emanciparnos todas las juventudes en la Asamblea con derechos humanos desde diferentes enfoques, y el más importante para mí sería bajo la idea de la cultura de paz. Qué fascinante pensarnos desde los estrechos lazos entre los derechos humanos y la paz del planeta en su realidad total, no solo física o biosférica, sino también histórica y social tras el tiempo que nos ha tocado vivir. Momentos difíciles que atraviesa un planeta mundial, problemas económicos, ecológicos y sociales, por ejemplo, la violencia de género, violencia por diferencias económicas, sociales, de raza, de religión, de seguir así cuál sería la sociedad que nos espera en una década o quizás menos, y sobre todo analizar si se están respetando los derechos humanos, así como la participación y la mirada desde y para la juventud a partir de la educación para toda la vida, como un derecho social para la sostenibilidad integral que promueva la preservación amorosa de la civilización. Tiene que ser a través del reconocimiento de los derechos y de la acción ciudadana con la capacidad del diálogo y construcción de nuevas realidades para alcanzar el bien común y la felicidad durante y después de la pandemia. Establecidas estas concepciones, es importante pronunciar las desigualdades excedentes como un factor desfavorable entre todas las juventudes. Y el propósito es claro para la agenda: mejorar el desarrollo sostenible a través de la participación en el desarrollo de políticas públicas, no para equilibrar los déficits que solo fortalecen más las desigualdades, sino dando solución a los problemas de cada región y procesar las diferencias sociales, económicas y ambientales que han dado inestabilidad, tensiones y conflicto ya característicos del mundo. Es así que está planteando, pues no sé, propugnar a la mejor contra los gobiernos neoliberales. Y por otro lado, las tendencias actuales de la migración también expresan una historia de marginación para cada país, donde se articulan migraciones internas, internacionales incluso también, e internacionales como parte de un movimiento contemplado para transformar a sus familias en lo actual y en lo futuro. El tiempo de estancia puede ser indefinido, lo que no es indefinido es la creciente cantidad de estas prácticas durante las últimas décadas. La migración es la muestra más clara que la mayor parte de los jóvenes es un mercado que da poder y dinero, por lo que la migración no debería ser sinónimo de lucha si se garantizara la vida de las personas en sus lugares de origen y su desarrollo. Un orden que permitiría que todos tengan las mismas oportunidades de vida. Lo que hoy nos toca, lo que hoy nos queda claro es que los sueños de los más vulnerados pueden verse marginados, más aún, pero nunca se permitirá cesar ante la lucha por conseguir mejores oportunidades de vida. Es así que los desafíos del tema migratorio son un elemento fundamental y funcional al proyecto de la agenda y que todos debemos llamar una utopía. Por último, es importante tratar en ellos paradojas históricas de cada región. En mi caso, desde los aztecas, los mayas, los purépechas y cualquier civilización prehispánica o mestizada que pasó a ser una colonia. El equivalente a las formas violentas de quitar la cultura de un pueblo nativo, pensando de ser grandes astrónomos, arquitectos, al ser la otra. La raza, lo que único que concurre es la destrucción colectiva. Para modernizar a nuestros pueblos originarios mediante los estereotipos, donde además de la vestimenta se adoptan los programas de educación desde nuestras raíces, en nuestra modernidad, que no es pura en esencia, pero tampoco parece a la modernidad europea. Es una combinación, es heterogénea, es una medición de culturas y que ha tenido una trayectoria ni puramente endógena ni impolutamente impuesta. ¿Para qué hacerlo? Pues porque va de la mano con la contribución de una identidad cultural que da libertad ante la vulnerabilidad vivida por las violencias. Se trata de una emancipación a la modernidad que detalle los valores y prácticas colectivas para desplazarnos a un polo intercultural y entendernos las juventudes para el bien común. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Francisco. And thank you to all the panelists for your large contribution. Indeed, we are tapping. I'll just then give you the last question. And then while you're answering the last question, kindly also just include your concluding remarks. And that question would be, what is JCE currently doing that you could see as an intersectional leveraging opportunity for youth and student-led campaigns in 2022 and beyond? This question goes to all the panelists. Tap on it and then give us your concluding remarks. And we'll start with Rawan. Okay, while Rawan is getting ready, Paula Sessa, would you want to take the stage? Okay, then we move on to Cameron.
Yes, thank you. As I said before, something that I think GCE should try to do is to encourage its membership to also have youth student seats within their structure. I think GCE is already setting an example by having, in this case, Martina and Esther representing the constituencies, but I think the next step forward is also to encourage different platforms at the national level, regional and local level, to also have students and youth in their structures, because we many times are, as I said before, relegated. We have our own space that are student and led, student and youth led, but we need also to be part of other kind of forest, and we need society at large to be aware of what kind of issues we are witnessing as students and as youth. So I think in any case that this Youth Month has been also an example of cooperation within young people, between young people within the GCE structure. And I think, and I believe this should be done more. So probably the people listening to me right now will take notes on that. I think it has been a really nice opportunity to meet other people, to learn from each other, and we should keep on doing that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Carmen. Naomi?
I think I would have to agree with what Carmen has mentioned, and I think the only thing that I would add is that, and it would be unfair for me to say that this is not something that you are already doing, because I don't have like full knowledge of the workings that go on in the background. But I think that there should also be an intentional effort to not only include students, but to include students that represent the most marginalized and the most vulnerable communities, because we need their voices as well. And I'm cognizant of the fact that more times these are people that are very difficult to reach. I mean, having a forum like this, probably they don't have access to internet, or they don't have access to like the other tools to be able to come onto Zoom. But I think that we have the opportunity to very, as I've said, very intentionally go out and seek out and bring these voices to the table and pass on the microphone to people that often go unheard. But I will say that this is really incredible to see. And as the first speaker said from our introductory speech, this isn't something that's tokenistic. It's not something that GCE is doing because it's what's in right now. It's something that's been thought out, and it's great to see, and I'm really appreciative to be part of this session. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Naomi. Paulo Cesar, you may take the floor.
Sí, yo quisiera agregar, bueno, creo que la CME está haciendo actualmente, ¿no? Este fondo de financiamiento para proyectos jóvenes creo que ha sido muy importante. En verdad, los países en Latinoamérica, bueno, que estamos sacando adelante proyectos ligados a la juventud, realmente pues hemos podido visibilizar las problemáticas que estamos teniendo, y además con este pequeño fondo, obviamente ver la oportunidad de pues sacar adelante luchas mucho más concretas, ¿no? Teníamos pues esa necesidad, por así decirlo, de tener un apoyo para poder formar a las juventudes y además plantearnos retos mayores en torno al derecho a la educación. En Perú, en verdad, estamos sacando adelante un proyecto muy bueno, y pues vinculándolo con una acción real, es una acción legislativa. Básicamente, no solamente es formación, también es poner en uso, por así decirlo, poner que los líderes que están llevando la formación saquen adelante una iniciativa legislativa para poder, pues, normar a nivel del país, y poder, obviamente, que ellos a nivel del país puedan tener el derecho a la educación en mejores condiciones. Estamos hablando de un tema de salud, de un tema de internado de los jóvenes del área de salud. Entonces, bueno, ha servido de mucho, en verdad. Los jóvenes que están siendo parte de este proyecto están bastante contentos porque nunca se había hecho antes algo así, ¿no? Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. Francisco, would you like to take the last question and give us your closing remarks as well? Just generally contributing to what is JCE currently doing that we could see as an intersectional leveraging opportunity for both youth and student-led campaigns in 2022 and beyond.
Sí, de alguna otra forma agradecerles primero por el espacio. Nos llevamos mucho que reflexionar el día de hoy, y de alguna otra forma es lo que deberíamos hacer precisamente desde los foros de nuestras regiones, como ya lo mencionaban anteriormente, pero hacerlo de una forma vinculada a un progreso y a un proceso donde no solamente se enfoque a un solo sector, ni tampoco que solo sea para un grupo de personas, sino que sea abierto y que se tenga un mayor alcance y un mayor enfoque. ¿Cómo lograr este mayor enfoque? Pues a través de las tecnologías. Sí, desafortunadamente vivimos en regiones donde a lo mejor no hay una condición para poder llevarla, pero de alguna manera buscar formas de llegar hasta el último rincón, donde realmente ni siquiera hay maestros, donde ni siquiera hay personas que están enseñando a un niño a leer, que ni siquiera están enseñando a una persona, o que realmente toda su vida se la pasan sin una idea de las palabras, de las letras. Son analfabetas en todo el sentido, ¿no? Entonces, contribuir más que todo en una educación para la vida y no en una educación pensada solamente para un ciclo de vida, ¿no? Entonces, creo que eso debería ser muy importante para poder mejorar la ciudadanía, que es lo que ustedes están pensando, la ciudadanía global, ¿no? No es una cuestión más de pensar como un ciudadano que es una cuestión de conexión con la naturaleza. No solamente es eso, sino también pensar en qué estoy haciendo yo para contribuir con los demás, ¿no? Entonces, también me parece muy importante los proyectos que se han estado financiando. El que se tiene acá en México también es muy sorprendente y se está teniendo una buena captación de personas, entonces creo que es lo más importante y pues a lo mejor buscar también la forma de no solamente financiar unos cuantos, sino financiar un poco más, ¿no? O sea, sí suena bien utópico y suena a lo mejor bien nosotros como con ganas de tener más, ¿no? Pero yo creo que es posible si lo soñamos y yo creo que es importante si lo seguimos, si lo seguimos trabajando. Entonces, pues agradecerles y sería mi participación hasta aquí.
Thank you so much. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all our panelists for that impactful discussion, for all your contribution. It has been a great conversation. We loved it. We tapped into your knowledge, and I'm sure we are taking notes. Without any further ado, I would now give the floor to Martina to just take us through a presentation on the GCE Youth and Student Engagement Strategy for us to get a bigger and in-depth understanding of what the strategy focuses on, and probably from this presentation it will shape our understanding moving forward. Martina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Esther, and thank you to all the panelists for all of the points that you have put forward. I'm happy to introduce now the current strategy, what it looks at. And in this way, then, once we get after the video and the presentation of the campaign, then we'll be having a Jamboard activity where we'll be asking you to write down your ideas for the strategy on an online tool, but you're also free to use the chat function as well. But without further ado, I'll just go on to share my screen and start the presentation. Is this clear, like this, the presentation? Fantastic. Okay, so our youth and engagement strategy. The goals of the strategy were basically, the previous goals were to have a 3-year strategic framework that can be used by the whole civil society movement for education, and in so doing, then inspiring new steps for genuine youth and student engagement. We see that the strategy should not be something isolated. It's not a policy document that we put out and goes onto our shelf or our frame on our wall and becomes very dusty, but that it must be part of a continuous process of mainstreaming youth and students into all parts of GCE's structures and the general work of the movement. We're already on a good track on that. And now I would say as well, even the national coalitions and the constituencies themselves are all taking steps in this regard to engage the movements they are aware of, led by youth and students. And so it's important for us to continue supporting this from our side, from GCE's point of view, in the next strategic framework as well, in order to support them in developing and coordinating their own strategic plans, be it at the national level or at the region level, Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. You
Did
just froze for a little while.
Okay. Was I on the slide?
Yes, you were on. No, you were on the slide before. So maybe just, I think it was the second last point that you were making, Martina.
Very good. So the second to last point was that the strategy should not be an isolated document that we just approve and forget about, but this must be part of a continuous process within GCE and its members to mainstream youth and student engagement in all parts of our structures. We've seen a lot of work being done at the national level and through the national coalitions and the constituencies. And it's important that now that GCE has established its two-person board representatives for youth and students, that we now look to supporting the national coalitions and constituencies to develop and coordinate their own strategic plans for implementing youth and student engagement. Then on the slide of giving a bit of a context as to why it's important to support youth and student engagement. Why are we here and what are we fighting for? Basically, it's to achieve a sustainable future. And we know it's a fact for us that we can achieve only a sustainable future if this current generation and the next generations feel like they can take ownership and actively engage in making it a reality, in having a say in the decision-making processes of our governance. From the GCE context now, rather than the general one, the youth engagement strategy is based on the GCE strategic plan. It supports its development. And I've taken a quote out from the strategic plan where it's written that GCE believes that the strategic priorities relating to the Sustainable Development Goal 4 and Education 2030 can only be achieved through growing a cohesive movement, which is made up of members collaborating together for reaching shared outcomes. So in fact, they highlight the important role that all stakeholders have to play. And of course, youth and students must therefore be included as equal partners and an extension of GCE structures in implementing the strategic plan. Going on now, I'm sorry that this is just words so far, but you will see, I hope that it explains exactly the kind of concepts that we are putting forward in the policy document, concepts that we should be continuously debating and that are important to understand how we define between ourselves, what is the common definition we are taking for what youth engagement means, what student engagement means. And some of the terms that you will find in the document, for example, include an intergenerational approach, where we see the engagement of youth and students being a co-created learning space between youth and adults. It's important to understand that both can contribute to achieving the goals that GCE strives for. Secondly, that there is a differentiation between youth representation and student representation, not in the sense of age factors, because you can have student-led organizations that are youth-led, so it's not in the aspect of age, but rather in the experience that they have lobbying with ministries, lobbying with stakeholders, where you can find that students or governments within a school, where you have a union, there, a council, being there and collaborating together with teachers and rectors of universities to implement the policies of that education institution. We then go on to giving a bit more definition as to how we see youth and how we see students, where GCE is adopting the 13 to 30-year-old age framework as youth. And as for students, it's important to highlight what role they are playing in their education institution. Are they just there as clients to take a service from their teacher, learn from the books and goodbye, thank you? Or are they also citizens, current and future citizens? So therefore, it's important to instill this feeling of being part of a community where they are not only just learning, but they are also having a say in what they are learning and what is the purpose of their learning. And then we also give further information on how we see the levels of students and youth engagement. And this is important for us to understand because it's where the power lies, really. Where you can have non-engagement at all. In the current paper, this is how it's stipulated, where you have either non-engagement, partial engagement, or meaningful and genuine engagement. And then we can also be discussing how this is relating to specific factors that we can also be measuring then later on. Do youth and students have access to information on the decision-making processes of their governing structures? Are they being consulted once every 2 months? Or are they in a constant dialogue with these decision-making bodies and partners? Or are they even better in full partnership? They have a place on the table, they have a vote in those processes. These are all important because it's not just about being engaged, but it's how your engagement is leading to impact. And it's important to keep up the motivation of young people and not lose their interest in what they're doing if they don't feel that what they're doing has an impact and a change. So I've given a little bit of some reactions as to how we see it. We're very happy when we're in constant dialogue. We're very happy when we're in partnership and we have a seat at the table. Whereas if we're consulted a little bit too late, or if we don't get papers that tell us, listen, this is going to be impacting your way of working, your way of learning, and we don't have access to that information, we're not so happy about that. Another table that I know might be a bit overwhelming to look at from the beginning, but if you start slowly, you can see from the bottom, we really see that's going from a policy document to actual youth and student engagement on the ground levels requires first and foremost having an environment that enables you to participate. There then requires to be objectives, key objectives, factors that can help you to engage yourself, be it funding, be it collaboration, being support, inclusion. And then we go on to the green row where we're talking about specific activities that can improve youth and student engagement, where you can have partnerships, as I was mentioning, capacity building, research, campaigns, advocacy initiatives. These all then can contribute and will contribute to us achieving the goals and ultimately the vision that GCE has as a movement. So I swear I'm coming down to the last few slides of my presentation and hope not to have bored you too much. I just wanted to outline the previous objectives of the strategy and how we have achieved those objectives, what activities we've done. So yes, we basically have been supporting the structures to ensure representation of youth and students by having the 2 seats for youth and students in the board of GCE. This was ratified in the World Assembly in March, but we're going beyond that as well in organizing wider consultations amongst the youth and student movements within GCE's networks. On the second objective, that's on funding, and that was an important element to be able to support grassroots movements. And this we're successfully doing through the ActionAid grant, where we are currently supporting around 20 projects distributed around the world. And based on these projects, now it's important to prepare a report on the activities of these projects. how the funds are being used to support youth engagement on the ground. And creating this report on the state of play for youth and student engagement will be a very, very important tool for GCE and its members to be able to lobby for more funding, for example, for applying for more project funding, but also for lobbying and advocating for more engagement in specific bodies and on the global level. On the third and final objective, that is to ensure progression and collaboration in strengthening youth and student engagement. We're very happy that we're widening the youth and student constituency. We recently had the Global Student Forum joining the GCE. That is a very important voice to have. That is the umbrella organization for student representation on the global level, and we'll be happy to be organizing more activities together with them in the Global Youth and Student Caucus meeting. That is planned for December. We're hoping to send you more information on that in the coming weeks, but it will be involving a number of networking opportunities on this very aspect of youth and student engagement, but also on the policy objectives that we've had. We've been discussing financing, we've been discussing the decolonization of education in a number of events, like the GP side events and the Youth Action Month, that we can take forward also in December. I think that is a sign that I should be coming to an end with my presentation. So this is the final slide that I have. What are the recommendations for the new strategy? Ideally, it shouldn't be like a 20-page document, but one that should have clear-cut objectives, both on the short term and on the long term for enhancing youth and student engagement. We should be specific in those objectives and how they can lead us to achieving meaningful impact and a sustained approach to youth and student engagement. It's therefore important that, unlike the previous strategy, we identify who are our stakeholders, who are our targets oriented to with these goals. Can they be partnered with us, or are we targeting our lobbying towards them? And what exactly are we asking them to do and why? Of course, then it's important to diversify the activities of GCE. We've had a lot of events, campaigns, projects, and it's important then, of course, to focus on capacity building, to have these policies, for example, the strategy, but also to take these forward and into advocacy towards the different stakeholders. Finally, and based on as well the discussions that you're having here, it's important to identify the policy objectives that we have. We've been discussing the decolonization of education and how to center that around our advocacy and activities. It's also important that the new strategy centers a gender perspective on it and takes an intersectional approach, because it's obvious that there are different challenges that need to be addressed. So this is what's currently on the plate and what is being brainstormed to be on the new strategy. So I'm really excited that after the video that we're going to have right about now and the campaign discussion, that we go on to a reflection and a thought and hearing from you your ideas that will go onto the Jamboard for the new youth engagement strategy. Thank you for your attention. And I will stop sharing my screen now. How do I do that? And I will be giving the floor over back to Esther for the video.
Christina.
Yeah.
I like going to school because school is fun.
मैं बहुत पढ़ना चाहता हूँ और मैं सब्जी बेचना नहीं चाहता और मैं सॉफ्टवेयर इंजीनियर बनना चाहता हूँ.
Que lo que quiero ser es técnico.
Je vais à l'école pour étudier. pour réussir, pour aider mes parents quand je serai grand.
Ce que mon père fait pour moi, je veux faire plus pour mes enfants.
I wake up to see my friends not being in school. I wake up to see my younger ones not being in school simply because there is poverty, simply because there is insecurity, simply because there is lack of funding in the education system.
La exclusión, la falta de acceso, los profesores que hace más de 10 años no han sido formados, que no están a la altura de la tecnología, presupuestos reducidos y una infraestructura ahora sí totalmente destruida.
Dans la salle où nous sommes, la première pluie, quand il a plu, nous, on ne peut pas tenir de cours parce que ça suinte un peu partout. Regarde, de la classe, on peut voir le ciel.
Tenemos otro problema, el otro desafío es la gratuidad de la educación.
The challenge is the money for the registration for school and the school fees.
मेरे वालिद साहब ने कहा कि मैं घर का खर्चा बर्दाश्त करूँ तुम भाई स्कूल का। तो मेरे वालिद साहब ने कहा, मैंने वालिद साहब से कहा कि मैं एक सब्जी वाले के साथ एज अ लेबर काम करूँगा, लेकिन मैं एक लोकल स्कूल में दाखिल होगा और मैं स्कूल के अखराजात खुद उस दुकान से पे करूँगा और अपनी तनख्वाह से पे करूँगा। तो वालिद साहब ने कहा
tiene mucho trabajo infantil, ¿verdad? Niños que andan en las calles, los niños más grandes cuidando a los más pequeños, entonces estos niños no accesan al sistema educativo.
वर्ल्ड बैंक का एस्टिमेट ये है कि अराउंड 1 मिलियन बच्चा जो है 22 मिलियन ऑलरेडी आउट ऑफ स्कूल था और उसमें ये 1 मिलियन जो है ऐड हो गया है बच्चा।
जी मैं पढ़ लिख कर टीचर बनना चाहती थी, आगे कोरोना की वजह से मैं स्कूल नहीं जा रही, जिस वजह से मुझे
बच्चियाँ ज़्यादातर ड्रॉप आउट हुई हैं और ये इम्कान बहुत ज़्यादा कवी है कि बच्चियाँ वापस स्कूलों में नहीं आएंगी।
So I think it's important that we include young people in policy making and also in the decisions that we make that affect them directly.
मैं सदर से ये कहना चाहता हूँ कि जो है स्पेशल बच्चों के लिए जो है फ़न और तालीमी इदारे बनाएं और उनके लिए जो है ये कोशिश करें कि उनको भी ये फ़ंड दें और वो भी कुछ बनकर निकलें।
La mayoría de las universidades están privadas en un país donde el 70% de la población no tiene los recursos económicos para poder pagar una universidad a precios exorbitantes.
Doter les écoles en matériel, mais aussi penser un peu au personnel et la formation du personnel et ensuite la rémunération.
Se supone que el gobierno debe de garantizar una educación pública y gratuita y de calidad, pero no tenemos ni siquiera maestros en las escuelas.
Señor Presidente de la República, señores donantes internacionales, necesitamos ayuda. Hoy más que nunca necesitamos ayuda.
I think it's high time for us to take education and put it in our priority list.
Los líderes mundiales y de los países que tienen mejores condiciones económicas deben de cumplir con los compromisos de ese porcentaje asignado a la educación.
La demande est forte.
Funding is very important.
Ensemble, j'ai l'habitude de le dire, on est plus fort que tous les obstacles. Ensemble, on est plus intelligent que tous les problèmes.
We must invest in our future. We must invest in children.
Podemos realmente dejar un mundo sostenible, dejar un mundo libre de guerras, libre de discriminaciones, del racismo, de los prejuicios también que existen.
Ensemble, qu'on puisse nous battre pour qu'il n'y ait plus un seul enfant qui ne sache pas lire, écrire et qui ne soit dans aucune offre éducative. C'est un droit et son effectivité doit préoccuper tout le monde.
Okay, sorry. I can't get.
Esther?
Thank you so
Martina?
much. Indeed, the last words that I took note of is take action now, fund education. The time is now for action to be taken. Thank you very much for that video. Let me hand over the floor to Christina to do a presentation on spotlighting PIE campaign. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, my computer. Okay. It's taking time. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. So thank you everyone for attending this meeting and giving me the opportunity to present the upcoming Education in Emergencies campaign we are preparing from the GC Secretariat, with inputs also from some youth representatives that are in this meeting. I hope you have liked the video we just played. It was shown on the Global Partnership for Education official agenda in the event in July, and I think it's very powerful and inspiring because it has the testimonies and the stories from people. So I hope this new campaign can do the same and give the cult figures real names and faces. So I have a very long presentation, but I'm going to go quickly through it because I would like to hear from you and what your ideas are about this new Education in Emergencies campaign. It will be launched in the 24th of January 2022 and will last for a year. And now we're in the planning process. We have to prepare a concept note in which this presentation is based, with the inputs also of some of the representatives of youth constituency. So, okay. My computer is not. Okay. So in the concept note, we have set the scenario, the background of the situation of education in crisis and emergency situations. I was very happy to hear that in some of your speeches to talk about these situations, because this resonates into this new campaign. We are living in an education crisis. Before the COVID pandemic, there were almost 150 million children and youth out of the school. And of course, the COVID pandemic have aggravated the situation. Education and emergency situations are very complex and intertwined. There is usually not one factor that impacts this situation. So we have conflicts and environmental disasters, which are on the rise. The increasingly long crisis situation, so increasingly we have more protracted crisis that impact the right to education, to quality and inclusive education in this context. For example, in last year, 2020, there were 82.4 million people forcibly displaced worldwide. And to get an idea of how this impacts in right to education, the data from the UN Refugee Agency says that 68% of refugee children are in primary school, but this rate decreases as children get older. So we have 34% of refugee children and youth enrolled in secondary school and only 5% in tertiary school. Emergencies are also linked to forcibly displacement. They have also a different impact on boys, girls, men, and women. And also we have seen an increase of attacks to education, to infrastructure, but also to students and teachers and learners. So this is an image trying to show how these drivers and factors are intertwined. So the rationale for this campaign is, of course, this crisis situation, the crisis of education in emergency context, and the fact that despite education in emergencies is a recognized element of the global education policy agenda, education is one of the most underfunded areas of humanitarian aid. And also the GCE has the mandate to deliver this campaign next year. So we have established with the help with representatives from all constituencies, one overall objective that you can read in the screen, that the international community takes concrete and effective measures to ensure transformative, inclusive and equitable quality education and lifelong learning for all in emergency contexts. And first up objectives, would being one, increasing political will to guarantee education and lifelong learning in emergencies at all levels, increase public financing for education and lifelong learning in emergencies, including the replenishment of the multilateral fund Education Cannot Wait. Third one, raising the voices of the people whose education is affected by emergency context, so that they are in the center of the global education agenda. And fourth, this is kind of more internal objective to increase the visibility of the GCE as a campaigning actor in this sector. So the approach we are trying to take is to build a transformative and intersectional campaign from the ground up, including integrating youth voices. So that is the main point of this presentation, to hear from you when I'm done summarizing what we have planned for so far. What are your ideas on how to integrate your voices and perspectives and opinions, not being like in a silo, but being an integral part of the campaigning? Promote intergenerational dialogues and including a gender perspective or approaching the campaign from a gender perspective. We speak of education in emergencies as a broad concept, meaning that we are not talking about the situations created by conflict and disasters, but also by other kinds of violence, like lack of resources or repressive governments. So we are basing on the Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies definition, which includes these emergency situations caused or provoked by violence. The third point or pillar of our approach is storytelling. So as I was saying, the faces behind the figures and bring the voices and stories of people affected to the center of the debate from a positive perspective. So no victimism here, but showing, empowering and hope, stories of hope, and showing what people is doing to reclaim the right to quality education in those kind of contexts. And then the fourth part would be work in partnership with, of course, GCE constituencies, but also some external partners that work in this area. So in the framework of this campaign, we will have... Sorry, I'm hearing the Spanish.
Sorry.
Okay. So in the framework of this campaign, we will be having a launch video for the 24th January, the usual toolkits, but we would like to also have a project that we are calling Voices from the Ground, inspiring in the video I just played, in which we will try to have a video on these lines, but showing and showcasing different emergency situations in different countries and telling the stories of the people affected. So we will have one longer video showing the global scenario through some case studies from countries, and then 5 shorter videos. We are aiming at least 5 countries, highlighting the specific of the countries chosen. We are in the process of choosing these countries now, but we will take into account, of course, regional and representativity, but also the drivers of each emergency context. And those be accompanied, joined by a report, journalistic report. It won't be a research report, but kind of journalistic report showing the stories of the people affected. These are the other campaign materials. We are in the process of developing a call to action with our campaign advisory group, which I will be explaining later. So that we would also be interested in hearing from you and what demands you think we should include in this call to action from your perspective as the youth constituency. This campaign advisory group, as I was saying, is in charge of inform the design, planning, and development and implementation of this campaign, including all the activities. We are still working on the campaign work plan, but it's formed by representatives of all of GCE constituencies and some national coalitions, and it has some representatives of the youth constituency, which is one of the channels that we are trying to integrate and take into account youth voices. But this meeting would be another channel, so I will be happy to hear from your inputs later or in the Jamboard. This is the timeline, so that's just, you see, we're in the planning phase. We're launching in January, then we'll have the second phase from the launch to the Global Action Week in the last week of April, and the third phase from the Global Action Week to the ECW replenishment, which will take place in September, 2022. So, well, this is we have had one campaign advisory group meeting on the 4th of October. The second one will take place next month. And those, I won't show those much longer because those are some of the potential asks that can be included in our call to action, but this is work in progress. So I would love to hear from you and your ideas on what we would be asking. So that's it. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to hear from you, your inputs, your perspectives, also ways that you think we could integrate more youth perspective in the planning and implementation of this campaign. And I'm leaving me and my colleagues' email in here in case we have not enough time for questions and answers, so that you can ask me anything you want or contact me on this campaign. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cristina. Martina, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Esther, and thank you, Cristina, for the presentation. So as you might have been realizing on the chat, we've sent over the links to the Jamboards. This is a tool where we can all have the ability to put in a sticky note and give our thoughts and inputs. So the first sticky note asks us, what should be changed or included in the strategy? What do you think is missing in it? So take some time and give your thoughts on that. On the second sticky note, we've got what are the focus areas you would like to see in the youth and student engagement. So it allows you to go a bit more into depth of the first points that you were mentioning in the first page. So you can, I actually share my screen so that you can see the format of this Jamboard. It's the same then for the other languages, just of course then in the specific languages. But basically, from the top button here, where you see 1/6, that's the first question. And then if you go to the right next frame, you can see the second question. That's on what focus areas would you like to see in the youth and student engagement strategy. On the third one, how do we use the educational emergencies and the learning hub as mechanisms for the strategy? Thinking ahead of the Global Youth and Student Caucus meeting, what do you want to see covered during the caucus meeting? How can we use the caucus to build solidarity, address constitutional barriers for youth and students, and intentionally politicize the GC youth and student strategy? So there you go, you have 5 questions, and we're looking forward to receiving your answers on those. Don't hesitate to put in whatever comes to your mind. There's no wrong idea. And we're also happy if you want to take the floor and also share with us your points of view. We have until 50, so that's like 12 minutes now before we need to go on to closing the event. So this is a chance for you to share as well your ideas, your inputs. Don't hesitate to simply unmute yourselves and take the floor, or perhaps raise your hand. I believe my connection failed again. I'm not sure if you had all received the last thing that I said in terms of the Jamboard and what the questions are.
Yes, we could hear
Very
you.
good. Okay, then we have the last thing that I then said was that we have 11 minutes left. So if anyone wants to take the floor and share their ideas as well, please don't hesitate to raise your hand and I'll give you the floor to share your ideas.
Martina, maybe while people are trying to access the Jamboards, maybe we can ask the first question to some of the speakers, and then if participants would like to also engage, people can then unmute and take it from there.
Most definitely. So, dear speakers, the floor is now coming soon to you. On what do you think is missing in the strategy and any particular focus areas that you would like to see in there included? I'll give you some time to think. You can also tell us that you're happy with the strategy, but I'm sure that there's always room for improvement. So feel free. Yes, Paolo.
Sí, ¿qué tal? Yo quisiera de repente preguntar algo que no me quedó claro. En la estrategia, ver si, cómo se había pensado de repente la participación de los jóvenes de las diferentes coaliciones, regiones, en espacios de mayor participación. No digo para representar, sino de repente para compartir experiencias, compartir conocimientos, saberes, de lo que viene pasando en nuestras regiones. Es un reto, creo yo, generar canales de comunicación entre jóvenes de diversas latitudes, no solamente entre regiones, en la región, ¿no? En Latinoamérica estamos intentando sacar adelante unos canales de comunicación y también pues, estrategias para poder conocernos y conocer nuestras problemáticas, pero sería interesante también hacerlo a nivel de otras regiones, a nivel mundial, ¿no? Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Paulo Cesar, for your input. Indeed. I believe I am on Okay, thank you very much for your input, Paulo Cesar. Indeed, that is one of the next actions that we are actually focusing on. We've been preparing a survey to send out towards the members of GCE to understand who they have been engaging with, who are the youth and student movements that they have been engaging with, what actions they have been doing, are they ready to be improving the structures as well to have youth and student seats in their executive teams, but also to invite them and invite these movements, hopefully to a physical youth and student caucus meeting in December, should the health situation permit. We do wish to meet in person. This would give us a very, very good opportunity than just meeting over online events, hearing each other speak and then microphones off and then goodbye. But to be in person, have the chance to sit down, have a coffee, eat, and then continue the conversation on how we can keep on supporting each other as you mentioned, cross-continentally between our movements. Very, very valuable point. Do we have more on this topic? I will check the Jamboard in the meantime.
We can maybe pose the next question.
Yes, definitely. So, so how do we use the education emergencies and the Learning Hub and the EFO and as mechanisms for the strategy? How would you say this can translate into activities, for example? What kind of activities can we see coming about? And I will pose the next question after, as it's related to the caucus meeting. So some ideas here. We've just had a presentation on the education in emergencies. How would you see that can support the strategy?
If I may, I think it would be really, really important to, first of all, explain to our constituencies and our members in all different parts of the world what means education in emergencies, because in many places we can have an idea of what can be education in emergency, but we should have a clear definition to understand in what framework are we working and what kind of actions can we develop. And I'm sure that, for example, in the global north, there are many, many people and students that even though they are progressive and they want to have a better world, they might not know exactly what is education in emergencies, because they, fortunately, they haven't had those problematics. So I think capacity building in terms of what is education in emergency is very necessary. But then also, once we have the knowledge, we will be able to think together about actions and about things to do. And in this case, I think for us it's also really important to listen mostly to the people from the global south, because I believe they have more experience in this kind of problematics. So I think it is important to listen and then to think collectively.
Thank you very much, Carmen, for your input there. As you said, it's very important to understand how education in emergencies is in reality in different regions. So thank you very much for that input. Do we have more on this question, or shall we move to the next question? Okay, so we move on to the next question. And this is on the Global Youth and Student Caucus meeting. What would you like to see covered during this caucus meeting? I mean, we have already been mentioning a little bit about the networking opportunities between the youth and student movements of the national coalitions and the wider, broader movement that GC is connected with. We've been talking about, through Carmen, capacity building on education in emergencies. But what more ideas would you like to see coming out in the caucus meeting? some of the other speakers, perhaps, who have not spoken yet. Mm-hmm. No one?
Maybe calling on people.
I could do that
not
too.
Even speakers. There's quite a few people in the space. Paulo Cesar has his hand up.
Sí, bueno, yo creo que es importante, por ejemplo, podríamos agregar en el caucus, se podría agregar, ¿no? Cómo en nuestras estructuras, en nuestros países, hemos avanzado a nivel, por ejemplo, de el periodismo en las redes, ¿no? O sea, creo que la forma más directa de vincularse con los jóvenes en este momento son las redes, y pues hemos aprendido, sin ser comunicadores, sin ser estudiantes de comunicación, muchos jóvenes de diversas áreas, hemos aprendido a utilizar las redes para hablar de nuestras problemáticas. Entonces, creo que sería interesante conocer cómo es que los jóvenes en las diversas áreas estamos logrando esto, ¿no? Comunicarnos con más jóvenes, convocar a más jóvenes. Por ejemplo, en Perú ha habido bastante experiencia en movilización social juvenil debido a las redes, convocada por las redes, espacios juveniles convocados por las redes. Entonces, es importante conocer esa experiencia. En Perú, bueno, el movimiento que yo lidero en Perú se forjó, en verdad, a base de la movilización en redes en un inicio, y luego pasó a una movilización ciudadana más grande, que fue una marcha, ¿no? Una marcha a nivel presencial, ¿no? Entonces, pero inició por las redes, ¿no? Muchos jóvenes estamos ahora en eso, y creo que sería importante ver estrategias de qué hacer, ¿no? Qué hacer de repente si hay alguna coalición, algún movimiento que no sabe todavía cómo salir con las redes o cómo utilizar estas herramientas. Sería importante compartir entre jóvenes cómo lo vamos haciendo.
Thank you so much, Paulo Cesar, for your input. Indeed, a very, very futuristic way of looking at mobilization within the movement. I do see more points on the Jamboards that are, yes, on the journalism and internet journalism, yes. So these are the points that Paulo Cesar has put in. Thank you. If there are no further inputs, then I will go to the last question. And how can we use the caucus to build solidarity, address constitutional barriers for youth and students, and intentionally politicize the GCE youth and student strategy? Carmen?
So from when I was in ESU, actually, something that in ESU we were doing, and I believe they're still doing within our events, was to give open spaces to the membership to organize their own sessions. So not just the organization itself gives capacity building, but the members are the ones leading on certain kind of sessions on the topics that they advocate for in their countries at the national level. So I believe this would be a way to build bridges between ourselves, because even though we've been discussing for several months the things that we were doing and we were cooperating already online, I think it would be really interesting to see ourselves explaining to each other what are we doing, what are our best practices, what kind of weakness we might have, and what kind of strengths. And I believe this would really enrich also the debates and the discussions.
Very good, Carmen. Yes, indeed, we do give the open organizing sessions ability, and we really do see It gives a space for our members to showcase the work they are doing at the national level, and therefore inspiring as well more actions and cooperation between the members. So thank you very much all for your input. Don't hesitate to keep inputting any ideas that you have into the Jamboards. And to close off the session, I will give back the floor over to Grant for the closing. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much, Martina, and thank you so much to all the moderators and all that spoke, all the speakers and all the attendees and the participants. It has been really an exciting journey that we have worked together, from the first session that we had to this very last one. I believe that this is not the last engagement that we're going to have on youth and student issues. This is just the beginning. We need to maintain the momentum that we have created. There are several spaces within GCE where young people and students can engage, and it will take upon yourselves, to avail yourself to ensure that you are part of that process. As GCE, the GCE board has already committed its willingness to ensure that youth are not marginalized. We're no longer talking of issues where youth discusses their own issues in a corner and come into the main meeting. We want to ensure that youth are integrated within the whole process. And this will take all of us, youth and others, to really engage on intergenerational issues, how to hand on the baton. I'm really excited to see that some of our regional leads are part of this event and have heard for themselves the issues that you as young people are raising. And the most exciting part is that some of our board members, of which Esther and Martina are part of, are also part of this event, and they have heard on all the issues that we have raised. And I think it will be important for us to carry on these discussions. We will support the process as a secretariat, even as GCE, to ensure that spaces are not only open at a global level, but are open in all the three key structures of GCE, which is the global, regional, and national. We want to ensure that young people sit in all the spaces because we're dealing with issues that affect young people. We need to ensure that the voices are integrated. They can sit on the table, no longer being sidelined or marginalized. I pray that one day we are going to throw this word marginalization out so that we are all considered equal to discuss on all issues, education, health, and everything else that concerns humanity. It is, I believe that you are all excited with that you would want to be part of that process. There are various opportunities of learning that are there within GCE. As some of you have been speaking, I've been taking notes. There's been a lot of discussion around capacity building. We do have a hub that is available where you can find courses around advocacy, education financing, and we do hold a lot of webinars where you can really learn on a lot of issues, just as everybody else does learn. And I hope that you take advantage of these opportunities. And also, in all the campaigns, we don't want just to do adult campaigns. We want to do issues that youth have also inputted into the process. We're looking for youth-led initiatives, youth-championed initiatives, and there is an opportunity to do that. And we are going to ensure that the resources are available. Time is set aside for youth to engage on GCE issues. The youth structure that we want to develop and to organize, it has to be different. It is not just on the basis of appointment as others do. We want to ensure that it is representative. Why representative? Because representative all the time comes with accountability. We want to ensure that we build that into the structure of the youth work. So I'm really excited to see and to hear all the key issues that you have mentioned. And I believe that together we can hold hands and ensure that all of these issues are delivered. All these issues are taken out. We will ensure that there are spaces, that there is no gatekeeping. We want to engage with the youth. We want you to find an open space of engagement and be able to raise the flag of education as young people, because this is the issue that concerns you. So it has been really exciting, to have all this conversation, and I'm sure that there are a lot that you have packaged, for the future, and we will ensure that those are supported, just as we've done with the rest. And from the Secretariat of GCE, we are committing ourselves, to be available. We will ensure that the resources are available, time is set aside, and that we have good staff within GCE that can support the work of the youth constituency. And we are looking forward to the growth of the youth constituency within GCE. With that, I say thank you so much, and it was really great, to have to be part of these discussions. Over to you, Martina, or whosoever will be closing the final one. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Grant. I believe Christina is going to be wrapping up and closing the event. So Christina, the floor is yours.
Okay. So I'm starting my video, sorry. Okay, I'm out. I'm sorry, I'm freezing. I don't know if you can hear me. Okay, now I'm here. So thank you everyone for attending this final event of this Youth Month of Action. I'm very happy to have been part of this conversation and conversations and get an idea of what your plans and goals and debates as a constituency are. It's very enriching forum to hear from young people from all over the world that are represented here, and it has been a pleasure to be invited to take part and also present the campaign. So I'm encouraging you to send me or my colleague or Carmen, which is the one I see here, or who is a part of the campaign advisory group, your ideas and inputs for the Education in Emergencies campaign. And also, I hope we can together find channels to integrate your perspective in this work. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for having me in this conversation, and I hope we could have more of those in the near future. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. And once again, thank you to the organizers, Zina, Christina, Grant, and thank you, Esther, as well, for your moderation of the session. I wish you, and thank you as well to the panelists for being here and your contributions, and all of you, finally, the participants, for being here. I wish you the pleasant rest of your day, and thank you all again.